Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the grecochess YouTube channel where we discuss the various aspects of the game of chess. Until now, we've presented games I've played on chess tournaments, my online chess tournaments, games suggested by my Facebook friends, but now time for something a little bit different. You may remember that about a couple of months ago, if you've seen the video, I tried the puzzle rush. How many puzzles can I solve correctly until I get three puzzles wrong? These puzzles are offered by the online platform of chess.com. At the time we hit 39. Today, can we do anything better? I try once again, and the rule is the following, that if I get three puzzles wrong, I'm out. How many puzzles can I get correct until I get three puzzle wrongs? And let me now share my screen with you. And one moment to be ready. Here we are. Puzzle Rush. I'm going to use the survival mode, meaning that I don't have a time limit. My only limit is three puzzles wrong, because I want to have enough time to explain what I'm doing and how I'm thinking in each of them. And we're going to hit the play button so the first puzzle can appear on the screen. And here we are. The first one. Let's see, what does white need to do? As usual, the first parts are quite simple and they have to deal with back ranks. And this is quite simple. You see the king in g8 is covered by pawns on f7, g7, h7. So if the king is checked, there's nowhere to go. So I'm going to check it, my rook on e1. And this is checkmate. Puzzle number 2. Let's see what's happening here. Let's make sure we get it right. Let's see what checks does white have. If queen goes g7, h7 or h8, the queen will be taken immediately. Why does it seem so hard? If queen takes on g6, it's a check, but there's no pin, so the queen will be taken. If rook goes to h3 to assist the check, the queen on h6 will be taken. But why? The material is the same both sides. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So white will need win a bishop by taking on g5. Let's see if there is anything better. Let's take it. Correct. It was tricky because I was expecting checkmate for so early combination, but it was only win a piece. Here we have again a topic based on back rank. It's not back rank clearly. If knight on c3 takes the bishop on by the way, in each puzzle, if you want, you can pause the video and try to think if you could do it on your own. If the bishop takes on, the knight on c3 takes on the bishop on e4, if the rook takes back, it's checkmate. Otherwise, one way or the other, white is a piece ahead. A piece minus a pawn to be exact. Okay, let me take the bishop. And now all I have to do is take the rook and I'm a piece ahead. Next one. The queen on c3 can easily take the rook on e1. Is there any follow-up? The king can go h2, f2. Yes, there is. Making three moves, I believe. The computer stopped it and gave me credit immediately. Here we have a case again of back rank. Rook take us the rooks on the E file are very strong. We have two rooks versus two, but first we get one, we take it back and then checkmate. Let's see now. Fifth will go to try. The sixth back rank into moves B8, then the rook will stop and C8 checkmate. Let's continue. Here it's an interesting case where black will sacrifice the queen and the rook on E1. The rook from E7 will go to E1 to check. And it's the knight on D2 that blocks the white king from escaping. Let's continue now. White cannot just sacrifice the queen. If I take the bishop on H6, I don't see follow-up. What will happen if the pawn goes to G5? Can the bishop be saved? But white is already behind by a bishop. Yes, there is a way to win the bishop on H6 if you push the pawn to G5. Doesn't... Yeah, but still white is going to be... will just recover the piece there behind. If bishop, if pawn goes to G5, queen goes to H5, which is queens, we win the bishop. And the material is even. Yes, white has a long-term advantage because of the pass pawn on H6, but now if white places the queen on D8 to prepare C7, perhaps queen goes to E4, check, and then wins the rook on B1. White needs to be careful with the rook on E1. Can the rook go anywhere? If it stays along the b file, not really better. If it leaves the b file, they lose the b6 pawn. That is very important. So I think the best move for white is push the pawn to g5 and win the bishop at least. And then try to see what they can do with the... Yep, change queens and win the bishop. Now this would be simple. It's a case of queen and rook collaborating. Queen goes to f2 checks and then to g2 checkmate. Now this is a case of a fork. Knight goes to f2 checks and they can win the queen. But is it better to win the queen or go for the smothered mate? Let's first move the knight to f2. Computer stops it here. Otherwise, white would be we have to choose either win the queen immediately or go for a smothered mate in 3-4 moves. Let's see what's happening. Once again, we take advantage of the fact that the white king is blocked by its own forces. Queen goes to d2 check, c1 check, and rook to d1 checkmate. What else can we do? Once again, back rank issue. Queen to f7 check, f8 check, and rook to f8 mate. Here, what can we do? Yes, we have queen versus rook, and especially with the pawn, so the white rook cannot by itself make a fortress, but the pawn on a7 is very near promotion, so black must need to do something fast. If they go here to e3, it to check the protect the pawn, and king goes to d1. Yes, f2 check. Okay, this should be the case. This is a case of a smothered mate, as they call it. Queen goes to g8 check is going to be taken by the rook, but then the knight to f7 is checkmate. This would have been a case of what they call it, of a pin. Rook goes to e8, And can the queen escape? We need to make sure that white doesn't have any fast checks, not that I can see. The knight, if it goes to f6 or b6, it's not checking because you think you pin the queen and then the opponent checkmates you. No, but this is not the case. Rook is going to e8 and pins the white queen. Now, what can we do? Black can easily win a piece the knight on d4, but they're behind by 2 pieces. So even if they win this, they'll still be back by 1 piece. So it's better need to do fast something while they have the attack. Otherwise, yes, it'll be down by 1 set of 2 pieces, but still the game will be against them. First of all, let's take the pawn on f2. Next one. Check from f1, and then the rook checks on f1, it's mate. Let's see what can we do now. Out of checks, the only one that I see reasonable is the bishop going to b5. By the way, in the first two puzzles, until we reach really very high ones, most moves start with a check. We saw one exception where, a couple of exceptions where we won pieces for free, but most start with check. If bishop goes to b5, king can go not too many places. If they don't want to lose their pawn on c7, king must go to c8. Let's see. Yep. Queen will go to b8 to check. Queen to c7. And now it's mate. Not just a pawn winning, but a mate. And now this is a case, this is an opening trap. If you're not careful, you could get checkmated before you know what's happening. Knight goes to d6, checkmate. Here's a case of winning a queen for free. Could it be more than that? If my bishop from d7 goes to c6, at the very minimum, next move, my queen will take the opponent queen, but the king has nowhere to go. So the only answers for black is to move the pawn to e4 or the rook to f3, but this will only delay the mate by 2 moves. Yes, it's mate. Let's continue now. Black is blocked. Black has more material, but you have the rook on a8 and bishop on c8 blocked. Only the knight on c4 is doing something important. It looks like a case where the white pawn can be promoted. The king cannot stop it because the white rook controls the file. If pawn goes to h6, what black can do? The rook on a8 can do nothing. The knight on c4, it cannot go to d6 or e5, it's going to be taken. If it goes to e3, it's going to be too slow to stop the pawn. What else? Can the bishop on c8 do something? If pawn goes to h6, black pawn goes to f5. That is the main challenge because then if pawn goes to h7, no, it's still black doesn't have enough time. Now with the bishop going to d7, there is the danger that the king can go to d7. But look what we're going to do. Rook goes to g8 now, and black will either, yes, they couldn't stop the pawn from promoting. Let's see what's going to happen now. Queen can go to f2 to check. King goes to h1. Queen goes to f3 to check. King goes back to g1. No, cannot go back because of the bishop. Queen goes to f2 check. King to h1 and then queen to f3, and this will be mate. Next one. Two sides start with about the same material. Black is an extra pawn, if I'm correct. But we have the pin on the bishop on c4. If the white rook from a3 goes to c3, what can black do? How can they defend the bishop? Because attack twice, defend it once. I don't see how, so I'm going to place my rook on c3. It's defended twice. My knight is going to go to d2 now. Yes, black found a way to defend twice, attack twice. So my knight will go to d3 to attack it a third time. Yes, correct. Let's see what black can do. You see that the white king is in a bad situation, meaning he has nowhere to go, but it's not in check. If it could be checked, but how can it be checked? Who controls the free squares for the white king? Why can't the king move anywhere? Because there's a black rook on c3 and the black king on g6 and the black pawns on f5 and d5. But what if the rook from h5 went to h4 with a check? Yes, black sacrifices a rook. In fact, this is the only answer for black, but then the knight will go to h5 and checkmate. And yes, that's it. Let's see what's happening here. Here you're going to see that black has a wonderful pass pawn on f5, but needs 4 moves to promote. Question, is it in the square? I'm going to draw an imaginary square. Yes, what's going to happen if the pawn goes to 4, black has the following dilemma. If they grab this pawn here, the king cannot go. If the king decides to leave, then as it approaches at some point, the pawn on g4 will take f3. Yes, black decided not to contest the pawn and grab the other pawn, so the pawn promoted. Let's see what's happening here. The white king is not in a very comfortable case. It can only move to f6, to c3 if it's checked. Anyway, we can check, and not to c3, I'm sorry, to d3 if it's checked. Anyway, you can check it and also control the d3 square. Yes, if the knight goes to e5. Now, this is a case, it looks like a smother mate. We start, let's see if it's the case. The black knight goes to h3 and it's a double check. Both the knight and the queen check, so king can only go to h1. Queen goes to g1, check, rook takes it, and then smothered mate. We got this one. Now, you see that the black king is not in a very comfortable case. It can only move to h1. What if the white bishop checks on b6? Thinking either go to h1 or place a bishop. If they place a bishop, now the story is the following: black bishop goes to b6. What if the king goes to h1? Is there a follow-up? Not that I see. But if queen goes to b6 to check, if I see. Bishop goes to b6, checks, king to h1, and then queen goes to d5, and could go perhaps to g1 for mate. Let's see if this is going to work. You have what's called a quiet move, a move without a check, and so you need to be sure that your opponent has no way to defend, no Sichenzug, it's called in between move. Let's see if this is the answer. Yes. Queen goes to d5 and threatens checkmate on g1. How can white stop? If they place a bishop, they lose a piece. And currently the material is the same, so a piece is important if they can get it. Any other way, not that I can see. Queen, queen, rook, rook, two, yes. Queen cannot check from anywhere, so let's take what we can. Yes, that's the correct answer. Here it's an interesting case. Queen needs to go to h2 and check. Look, in puzzles, many times a queen sacrifice is the answer or the key to the problem. In real chess, very few times the queen sacrifice is going to work, and most of the times, if you sacrifice a queen, you will end up losing your queen because somehow the opponent will find some way to get out of that. But in this puzzle, I see that the queen sacrifice is the answer because when rook checks on h6, king has nowhere to go. And now let's see what is happening here. You see a king in a difficult situation where the king can easily go to uh, d3 and get out of it. But if the knight goes to f4 to check, king cannot go there, can only go to f2. But then queen can go to g2 and is it mate? I think so. Let's give a look. Yes. Here, look at the situation. Many times in real games, I found myself both on the winning and losing side like that. The bishop is on h3 and checks and threatens with mate. The problem is that if pawn goes to g3 to save it, or then black will take at least exchange, will win the rook on f1 for the price of a bishop. One way out of that is if the knight goes to h4 because it both covers the square and threatens the queen on g6. Let's see if this is the answer. If nothing else is there, that could be, but if the queen leaves the g file, then the bishop is lost. Queen can go, of course, to g5 or g4. Yes, but then the queen will take the bishop. So let's try this in here. Yes, now this is the answer, and white won a piece. Here, let's see what uh, white can do. If the rook goes to h5 to check, king will go back to the 6th rank, and so what, you may wonder. But what if the rook goes to the 6th rank? Then the king cannot go, but what is checkmate? But here there is a nice little answer because of a steward. Pawn will go to g4, and no matter what black does, whether taking with whether the king moves or taking the pawn, the rook is lost. Yes. Let's see here what we can do. If the queen goes to f8, is it a mate? The king has nowhere to go. I don't see anything else coming in the way. I think queen to f8 is one move checkmate. Yes. Let's look at the next move now. The white king is not in a nice situation. Material-wise, they're the same. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, yes, black has an extra pawn. That's it. Now, there can be a check from e3 either with the bishop or with the queen. It's better with the queen, excuse me, it's better, sorry, with the bishop because if the king goes to either e1 or d1, queen can go to a1 check, rook can cover it, but I think next e checkmate. Let's take a look if this is the answer. Yes. This is a multi-move combination. Rook goes to h1 check, king takes it, queen to h4 takes it, and then h2. Now let's see what's happening. The white king can only go to h2. If it's check, for example, no, to h7. If the black bishop goes to f7 to check, king goes there. You can have a perpetual, but nothing better. But what if the black king first goes to g8? Then there is no escape after the check. Yes, of course, the white bishop tries to postpone, goes here. Is there escape square? I don't think so. Bishop to f7 and it's mate. Here, the bishop on f1 can be grabbed by the black queen especially. Both the rook and the queen, but the queen, if the queen king will go to h2 either way or other, but if the queen was there, it can continue the checks from either g1 or h1. If the rook goes there, Now the queen, if it tries to check, it's going to be taken. So most likely the queen has to take, but what is the follow-up? Because whether the queen checks on g1 or h1, the white king goes to g3. Yes, but then queen goes to e3 to check. I think that should be the answer. Let's give a look. If it goes to g1, no, it's not so simple. It can go to f2 and threaten mate, but what can white do? White has a lot of things, a lot of ways to continue. Waiting, the black queen needs to go either to g1 or to h1. In either case, king goes to g3. If black plays a quote-unquote quiet move, black can check from e7, for example. Let's see what black can do here. If black starts checking from e7, if white, I'm sorry, starts checking from e7, then the black king will start going right and left. Because really, if black had the next move, they could move, for example, the pawn to h5 and be near h4, or the queen could take on f2. And need a check for black. Can they threaten the black queen? Yes, the black rook can go to c1 and threaten the white queen, but so what? Can they cover the square e7 so there is no check from there? No, I don't see anywhere to cover it. There's a danger. The king goes to g3, and if white could play a second move in a row, then queen goes to f4, and that could lead to mate. That's very dangerous. I'm not sure what to do here. Can king go to, not go to h4, then the pawn to g3 will check. Because in the end, we're going to check what is happening. Let's check from g1 and see what happens. It's wrong. We got a first error move, puzzle number 36. We got 35 correct. We're very near the record. Now, let's see here what's going to happen. If the queen sacrifices on h7, the follow-up is the rook goes to h3 to check, but then the king can escape on g6. What we need to do is, first of all, the black queen, excuse me, the white queen is for grabs. So, but if we put, The rook on h3, not only the pin saves the queen, but also there is a threat of mate on h7. What can black do? They can move the pawn to h6, but then, yes, we are still going to win. So this would be the answer. Rook needs to sacrifice itself. This is not exactly mate. The queen can cover, but now queen takes the rook and it's a mate. Next one, what we can do here. The bishop can go to f8 and check, supported by both rooks, but king has quite a few squares to go. Done 36 until now. 39 was a score last time. I have the luxury to lose one more puzzle. Bishop goes to f8. King goes to g6 or g8. At least g8, there's going to be a discover story. If rook goes to f7, yes, clearly the black king is not in a very nice shape. If rook goes to e7, if king goes g8 or h8 is very near mate. f8 is not mate because... But what if king goes to g6 or h6? Let's try the bishop on f8. This seems to be more promising because either you have a discover check, or if the king goes to g6, then rook can go to e6, and the black king has to go to the fifth rank. Let's try this one. Yes, correct. There's a lot of thought after that. The computer only showed it's correct. I wish it had shown more than that. What's happening here? If this pawn did not exist on h6, queen to h2 would be made, but I think we have a double threat. If knight goes to g4, we both threaten mate on h2 and also the knight on g6. And black cannot stop both. Or can it? Can No, if knight goes to f4, it's still going to be taken. Here we have to be careful. Do we grab the bishop? Yes, we do. Otherwise, cannot take the knight. But the queen will go to f3, but we're going to take it. And now it's mate. Okay, white won and wonderful rook for a moment. And now it's... Oh, no, it's a check. If it was not a check, I would have made. Now, where can the black queen go? Either g8 or e8. At least g8 is still threatening the knight. Yes, correct. If we do this, we equalize the previous score. All we need to do is get right one of the two puzzles. Here you see that you have the two queens facing each other. The white queen is not protected. So if the bishop, the black bishop on d7 could check the white king, then the black queen would win the white queen. But the white king is not dark square. So let's start checking, hopefully, hoping to bring the king on a light square. If a pawn goes to f7, that's the only way to check for now. If rook takes it, then rook to e1 check, grabs the other rook, and then we have the situation. But if the king takes it, then, yes, we have the fork. No, we don't need, now a rook will go here, rook goes back, and now bishop will check, and we win the queen. Good. So we equalize the score of last time, 39. Let's see how far we can go. Here is the case of the pawn d6 two squares from promoting, but if it goes to d7, then the black rook goes to d3 and stops the pawn. Of course, a white rook would go to e7 to encourage to protect the pawn, but it would be a long battle. What if the white rook went on d5? The black pawn could check on d5. The king goes to e5. Rook goes, for example, to h3, pawn d7. No, that should not be the case. Now something else. What if the rook checks from c5? Black rook takes it, pawn goes to d7. Rook goes to d3 to stop it, and white king takes it. So this would be the first not mistake. Second mistake. Let's see if we can break the record. We need now to get this one right. If and we make a new record. Otherwise, we get stuck again at 39. If queen checks from b2, the only answer that doesn't lose the game is if the bishop goes to c2. Yes, if bishop goes to c2, what's the follow-up? Rook goes to e2 check, black king takes it. No, it's not so easy because the queen will be in the middle. What if we exchange bishops first? Yes, because the queen instead of the queen will go, and then the black rook would go here. Let's exchange first the bishops, if this is the answer. Yep, yep. The rook goes here, and now we win the queen. So we got 40. We broke the record of the last time, but we cannot afford to lose anything else. Let's see what's going to happen here. The bishop on g3 is an attack, but if we win it, not too much. If we could stop if we could somehow remove this bishop, then queen can go to f2 and checkmate. But how can this happen if it can happen? What if a bishop went to d6? Because if they took it, then the queen goes to f2 and checkmate. What can black do? They can place the bishop on h4, but then the queen will grab it. Is material the same? Black is an exchange down, but I'll try this. Bishop goes to d6. Let's see if this is the answer. Nope. And we stopped at 40. We broke last time, but only for one. Let's see what did we do wrong. 1930, this puzzle here we got wrong. And let's see the solution. Yes, queen takes. Queen goes to f2. Yes, but it did not say what would happen if we went to e7. Let's see the next one, the 2170. I mean, this numbers that you see here is how strong they are. We started from an easy 184. With the toughest we did was 22.29, and there was one 22.57. That was the last one we missed. Let's see this one. Let's see the solution. It was the other way around. First the pawn goes and then the rook goes in check, meaning we had the idea correct but wrong move order. Let's go to the last one. You wanted the bishop to go to d6, exchange, and queen checkmates here. Let's see what was the answer. Bishop here, a knight. Okay, yes. If you take it, you take the rook. So, ladies and gentlemen, we broke the previous record by just one. We had 40 instead of 39. Tonight, I'm participating at the Queen's Chess Club, so hopefully the next video will have what happened tonight at round number 1. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the viewers. This is Harry Lassaneziris. Thanks to subscribers, to the likes, and to the comments. See you in the next video. For now, goodbye.